I think we're off to a pretty good start already with laughing. But I have to tell you, as I was preparing for today, my experience went something like this.
Hi, Marge. It's God. I couldn't help but notice that you look a little stressed and upset. What are you working on?
My sermon.
Oh, from the look on your face, I guess you got one of those passages that no one wants to preach on, like Ezekiel 32:7, that goes like, "And when I extinguish you, I will cover the heavens and darken their stars. I will cover the sun with a cloud, and the moon will not give its light."
No. It's a sermon on joy. Humor, to be exact.
Oh, well, with a subject like that, no wonder you look tense. Read what you have so far. No, really, read it out loud.
Seriously.
Well, joyfully would be more appropriate, but just humor me.
What was that?
Sorry, it was just the angels giggling a little.
Very funny. Okay, here goes. I looked it up, and one source puts the number of references to joy in the Bible at 214. Now, while the word humor is not found in the standard translations, God's, your, laughter is described. So we can assume that God, you, have a sense of humor. Now, Webster defines humor as the ability to be funny or to be amused by things that are funny. Am I boring you?
Well, you are reading the book of joy, right?
Yes.
Here's a suggestion. Why don't you review what it says on page 221? I'll be back later.
221. 221. 221. I reckon there are many people who think they have to be somber because it gives them gravitas, and they feel they are more likely to be respected if they are serious. But I believe very fervently that one of the ways of getting into the hearts of people is the capacity of making them laugh. Well, apparently, God is a literary critic. Now, I learned a lot about humor from my dad. He was clever, and he was witty, and when I was a teenager, he was exasperating and irritating. He had a ready smile, and he genuinely enjoyed life. He spent nearly 70 years as a member of Central Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, in Indianapolis. And during that time, he spent several terms as chairman of the board, which is kind of like our moderator here. And I remember he would go to the library, and he would actually check out joke books so that he could have this repertoire of appropriate stories that he could tell when things got a little heated at the board meetings. Now, those don't happen here, but Tony, wherever you are, I want you to take note. So he could insert one of his stories to illustrate a point or diffuse tension, and he could get people to gain a new perspective by making them laugh. Here's a story he would tell when people were acting on perhaps incomplete or incorrect information. So a young man was ready to go to work in the morning, and on his way out the door, his wife said, "Now, honey, don't forget what day this is." Well, he had no clue. And all the way to work, he thought and thought and thought, and he could not come up with anything. But just to be on the safe side, he had flowers delivered in the morning, And in the afternoon, a box of candy appeared at the door. Well, when he got home that evening, his wife met him and she said, "Honey, that was the best Groundhog's Day I have ever had." Now, another one that my sister and I both loved, my dad would tell about some kind of action that had unintended consequences. And a lot of my dad's jokes were around church. So a minister had received a parrot as a birthday gift, and the parrot just had a vocabulary of nothing but swear words. And he had this horrible attitude. Well, the pastor tried talking sweetly to the bird, and he played nice music, and that didn't work. So he got angry, and he yelled at the bird. That didn't work either. So one day, on a particularly bad day, he tossed the bird in the freezer to cool him off. Well, for a while, there was kicking and screaming and squawking and swearing, and suddenly there was silence. Well, the pastor was really mortified that he might have actually hurt the bird, so he yanked the freezer door open. But the bird walked calmly out on his extended hand, and he said, "Pastor, I am so sorry that I have offended you with my language and my poor behavior, and I ask your forgiveness, and I will do everything I can to behave better." Well, the pastor was flabbergasted, and he was just about ready to ask the bird what had changed when the bird said, "Do you mind if I ask what the chicken did wrong?" Another person who could make people laugh was Gary Larson. He was one of my favorite cartoonists, and he did The Far Side. And the stories of the Bible and the characters in the Bible were not exempt from his wit and the satire. So picture Noah on the deck of the ark, and he's looking at the throng of animals, and he says, "Okay, listen up. We are going to do this alphabetically." Or there's God at the laundromat, and the caption is, "And God separated the light from the dark." Now, Archbishop Desmond Tutu says this, and Penny read this to us a couple of weeks ago. Humor, like humility, comes from the same root word for humanity, humus. The lowly and sustaining earth is the source for all three words. Is it any surprise that we have to have a sense of humility to be able to laugh at ourselves, and that to laugh at ourselves reminds us of our shared humanity? This kind of humor says, "Come, stand next to me, and let's laugh at me together. Then we can laugh at you together." It does not belittle either of us, but uplifts us, allows us to recognize and laugh about our shared humanity, about our shared vulnerabilities, and our shared frailties. I'm so sorry. I didn't make her laugh. Life is hard, you know, and this is what he says next. Laughter is how we come to terms with all the ironies and cruelties and uncertainties that we face. I know that life is hard part is a lot of the reason that we don't laugh very much. And I think another reason is we listen to the voices of those around us who say, you know, if you've lost someone and you laugh, you didn't love them very much, or you don't miss them. Or if we have wronged someone, we're not entitled to laugh because we don't feel guilty enough. It's disrespectful and inappropriate to laugh in church. But the Book of Joy encourages us to laugh, even in the face of adversity, grief, and tragedy, or during worship. The Dalai Lama says, "It is much better when there is not too much seriousness. Laughter, joking is much better. Then we can be completely relaxed." He cited a study in Japan, but I, of course, had to Google it. And there are some scientific and medical benefits to laughter. So here are the 6 major ones that this website pointed out. 1, it promotes relaxation, stimulates circulation, and releases endorphins, which are natural pain relievers. Number 2, it boosts the immune system. Number 3, it improves mood. It shifts one's perspective. Number 5, it has social benefits. And number 6, which is kind of my favorite, it lowers the chance of heart disease. And there was an actual study that said that people with cardiac disease laughed 40% less at life situations than those without cardiac disease. So there you go. My dad served our country in World War II, and he didn't want to carry a gun. And so he enlisted so that he could choose his branch of service and what he would do there. So he chose the Navy, and he was trained as a quartermaster, which is a role related to navigation. Now, I never understood this because on land, my dad was always lost. And on water, he was always seasick. But he did witness some pretty traumatic events. But the stories he told about those times were really humorous. He was on the USS Hubby, which was a minesweeper in the South Pacific. And one time, his ship was under attack, and there were several other U.S. ships in the area. Well, their flag got shot down. And one of my dad's jobs was to run out with a new flag, get it up the flagpole, and run back without getting shot. So he did that, and successfully, but then the USS Hubby began getting signals from the other ships saying, "Are you hit? What's your emergency?" And the Hubby radioed back, "We're fine, why do you ask?" Well, my dad had put the flag upside down, which for you non-Navy people is a distress signal. So he had to run back out, take the flag down, turn it around, run it back up, run back without getting shot. I have to tell you that we had a similar situation here at CCSM just a few weeks ago. So I was in the office and I began getting calls from neighbors in the area saying, "We're with you, we support you, we think what you do is great." And finally I asked one of the callers, I said, "I really appreciate all this outpouring of support, but what makes you think we need so much help?" And they said, "Well, your Book of Joy banner is upside down." And it was. Like father, like daughter. And here's where my mom would have chimed in, proofread, proofread, proofread. So there were many other Navy stories that my dad told that made us laugh. We actually dubbed his collection "A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forecastle." And I truly believe that Dad healed, actually, from his war experiences by finding humor in the worst of circumstances. Remember when Penny talked about how closely joy and sorrow are linked, and she read from the prophet, "Your joy is your sorrow unmasked, and the self-same well from which your laughter rises was oftentimes filled with your tears." I found that true of my dad. One of the few times that I saw him cry was when he was talking about his Navy buddies that didn't return home with him. And yet, through those tears, he was able to tell the story of one of his close friends who didn't return home, who had left the can of paint for the chart room out on the deck in the heat and the sun, and there was a chemical reaction. Well, Dad was required to use the paint for rust control, and it was the only paint that they had on board. So for the remainder of the time that the Hubby was at sea, it sported not a gunmetal gray chart room, but one that was sky blue pink. After the 2010 earthquake in Haiti, one reporter wrote, "When earthquake victim Anna Zizi, 69, was pulled from the rubble, she was singing at the top of her voice. Her face was caked in dirt and debris. Even in the saddest moments, Haitian people always sing. Haitian people always laugh. Their hearts hurt, but they want to continue to live. Laughter, it seems, allows us to live. We do carry burdens that are no laughing matter. I do not disagree with that. Sometimes we are too sick or too worried or too busy. We just don't feel like it, and it's all we can do to keep a stiff upper lip. And it's fine to say, as in the scriptures, there is no law against joy or to make a joyful noise. But sometimes it seems impossible to climb out of that depth of despair. So how do we, you and I, climb out and move beyond our serious and our wounded selves into this sometimes uncomfortable and frowned upon environment of joy and humor? How do we begin to choose laughter, clapping, joking as ways of praising God or becoming healthier or recovering from trauma? Well, according to the Archbishop and the Dalai Lama, we have to work at it. The Archbishop says, I don't think I woke up one day and presto, I was funny. I think it's something that you can cultivate like anything else. It is a skill. So part of the answer lies in making a choice, making an effort, practicing, and being intentional. I'd like to share with you here that for a variety of reasons, between about the age of 10 and into my mid-30s, I was pretty serious, rigid, and controlled. I worked at not laughing. I actually remember working at not laughing, not cracking a smile, pretty much not showing any emotion at all. But in addition to having the legacy of laughter from my dad, I encountered other people who actually practiced joy. When I worked at the bank, I asked one of my colleagues, who at the time I thought was pretty irritatingly joyful and cheerful every day, especially before 10 o'clock in the morning. And I asked her, have you always been that way? And she said, no. I used to be very grouchy and judgmental. I just decided I didn't want to be that way anymore. And I met Greg, who became not only a good friend, but kind of my brother of the heart. We met around the '89 earthquake time, and his apartment had been destroyed in San Francisco, and I was able to give him shelter for a number of months. And he could get me to abandon myself to laughter like no one else. It was the kind of laughter that makes no sound and that you are pounding your fist on the table, that kind of laughter. So to this day, Greg, my spouse Jerry, others like you here at CCSM, you accompany me on this journey to joy. You help me find the light when I lose my way and when I lose my sense of humor. And I have come to agree with the Dalai Lama that it is much better when there is not too much seriousness. Laughter, joking is much better. Sometimes we just need permission to laugh, to see the humorous side of things, to imagine, to break out of the notion that laughter is irreverent or inappropriate. Gary Larson noticed connections and let his imagination run wild to gift us with his far-sightedness. And even the Dalai Lama and Archbishop Desmond Tutu say the way to a person's heart is through laughter. Humor is a saving grace. My dad used humor to ease tensions and lower defenses and heal from trauma. And shortly before his death, and he lived till he was 101, so we can only assume that he did laugh a lot, my sister called him. But by that time, he was restricted to bed. He was nearly blind and deaf, and he suffered from the disorder of the inner ear that causes that frequent vertigo. He had every reason to be discouraged and depressed. But when my sister asked, "So, Papa, how are you today?" he answered, "Oh, I'm fit as a fiddle, with 2 broken strings." Humor bridges distances between us. It allows our humanity to show. Laughter rescues us, and it rescues others. It restores common ground, that dirt again. So I can't resist sharing one more of my dad's favorite combo religious patriotic jokes. So the pastor noticed 7-year-old Alex staring at a plaque on the wall in the church, and the plaque had an American flag and a list of names. And Alex said, "Pastor, what is that?" And the minister said, "Well, Alex, that's a memorial to men and women who died in the service." So they stared at the plaque somberly for a few minutes, and finally Alex whispered to the pastor, "Pastor, which service? The 8:45 or the 11 o'clock?" Do 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 do.
Well, Marge, you seem pretty relaxed and happy. You about to give another sermon on joy?
No, actually, this one is on Lamentations. Amen.